As I was saying, it's a big thrill to be here and joining such wonderful speakers today, and I'm very happy that CPAC included me. Now, nearly a decade ago, Joe Biden was the proud architect of the new campus tribunal systems for adjudicating sexual misconduct. And Biden was then vice president under the Obama administration, and this was all about changing the sexual culture of America. Blatant social engineering. And the aim was to increase the number of date rape convictions. What Biden said was, we need a fundamental change in our culture, and the quickest place to change the culture is to change it on the campuses of America. And what he did was he decided to achieve that change by expanding the definition of sexual misconduct, including defining all drug sex as rape. It's rape, it's rape, it's rape, he said. And this is a man who has his own problems with sexual boundaries, being unable to resist sniffing women's hair. So the resulting campus kangaroo courts have been a huge disaster for American universities. They employ an army of administrators, and they have led to over 650 lawsuits claiming that the universities have failed to protect the due process rights of accused students, and most of these cases are found against the universities. The whole tribunal system is based on believe the victim justice, denying the accused normal legal rights, including access to lawyers, and making decisions using the lowest standard of proof. Judges across America, including Amy Coney Barrett, have been scathing about the bias prevalent in these pseudo courts. Barrett actually wrote one of the most significant judgments in this territory, where she chastised Purdue University for fundamentally unfair treatment of an accused male student who'd been denied the evidence that was being used to throw him out of the college. But Barrett wrote, it seemed that the college officials who had chosen to believe the female student simply because she was a woman. There have been case after case that exposing this nightmare that's resulted from Biden's social experiment. One of my favourites was the one that was mentioned in the California Law Review, where a gay male student was found to be guilty of sexual misconduct for looking at his partner's genitals without consent while having a shower with him. Or you may know about the famous Columbia mattress girl. She spent years carrying her mattress around the campus in process, claiming that another student had raped her, even though the university had examined the whole evidence around this and found her story didn't stack up. There were all these text messages showing her declaring her love for this man months after she'd accused him of rape. But Columbia allowed her to publicly name this alleged rapist in her mattress protests. They gave her academic credit for this performance art and permitted her to carry her mattress in her graduation ceremony. Well, finally, the family of this young guy sued Columbia for allowing this sort of harassment of him, and the university had to pay out big time. Now, in Australia, we saw this unfolding almost a decade ago, and yet we allowed our universities to be bullied into following suit. I've been writing about this for many, many years, and if you're interested in the history of all of this, you can look at my book, #Men2, which covers some of the articles as this all evolved. So just as it's happened in America, we had End Rape on Campus activists who manufactured a campus rape crisis. And this persisted even after we had a Human Rights Commission spend $1 million on a survey trying to prove there was a rape crisis. And mercifully, all they found were really tiny numbers of students reporting sexual assault, 0.8% a year. And but of course, that result was absolutely buried in what they called this epidemic of sexual violence, which was actually a lot of unwanted staring. But what happened then was quite extraordinary. In 2018, TEXA, which is our university regulator, issued a guidance note which was widely interpreted by the universities as telling them to get involved in the business of adjudicating rape. Now, this is the body which is charged with regulating our universities. It has its own tertiary standards governing what it can and can't do. There's nothing in these standards about sexual assault, nothing which justifies TEXA instructing the universities to usurp criminal law, to set up their own kangaroo courts. What TEXA did was they used the requirement to foster a safe environment for students, to issue these vague instructions to institutions which told them to cook up these regulations for investigating these crimes and punishing offenders. And what's really interesting to me is in doing so, they actually breached another regulation which requires equitable treatment of all students, because they were only interested in the safety of female students, who of course are usually the accusers, and failed totally to mention the rights of the accused, who are mainly male. And this means TEXA, our university authority, has overstepped its authority in persuading universities down this path. So what we have is all these untrained individuals blundering around on our university campuses, making decisions in secret committees with the power to steal the university's student's degree, robbing a student worth, $20,000, $50,000, years of effort, and plus their reputation and sometimes their whole career, and all without any proper authority. Now, I've got together a group of lawyers and other experts. We're calling ourselves Campus Justice, and we're intent on exposing what's going on here. We've got a former judge, and we've got a former director of the Queensland Department of Justice, and an expert on Texas regulatory framework. Now, we had a fantastic time last week because we put together a detailed letter for the new CEO of TEXA, who's a man called Alistair McLean, telling him about this whole history of TEXA's involvement in this area. And we're hoping that he's going to be the new broom that the regulator needs to clean up its act. He was previously CEO of Victoria's Anti-Corruption Commission, IBAC, and he was once a senior advisor to John Howard. So he should be someone who's interested in making sure regulators do their job properly and allowing universities to indulge in ideologically driven policies aimed at punishing men. So last Wednesday, we sent McLean this briefing letter, and that evening, Amanda Stoker was grilling TEXA in Senate estimates. Now, I'm sure you all know Amanda's wonderful work. So the TEXA officials included the Chief Commissioner of TEXA, a man called Nick Saunders, and she asked them whether they saw themselves as responsible for Australia's kangaroo courts. I hope some of you will have a look at the new YouTube video we've produced showing Stoker in action. It's just really funny watching Saunders get very hot under the collar at the suggestion they were responsible for these kangaroo courts. This has not been brought to our attention at all, that this was seen as a signal to by the sector, he said. And he claimed that the first time he'd heard this was in an email they'd received that afternoon, which was our email, which I thought was pretty exciting. Anyway, I hope you'll watch Saunders' extraordinary display of bureaucratic double talk and weasel words. And he even said that TEXA had seen no systematic evidence of failure to protect people's due process rights. What we include in this video, Amanda actually last year also grilled TEXA, and she had the squirming TEXA officials and waved in front of them one of the documents they'd produced, which was about the fifth document that TEXA had produced on this subject, and pointed out that it contained nothing whatsoever about the rights of the accused. And as she explained at the time, there's absolutely no possibility of justice in a system where decisions are made about these serious criminal matters while failing to allow access to lawyers, denying proper access to evidence, and making decisions using the lowest standard of proof, which is the balance of probabilities, rather than the high criminal standard of beyond reasonable doubt. Now I've been involved in this whole territory for a couple of years now, dating from when I was contacted by a student at Adelaide University, and he was facing a false rape allegation and being investigated by a university committee. And all the flawed processes that Amanda spoke about were on display in that case. The committee had the right to withhold that student's PhD. Years of effort he'd made could have been held to ransom by that committee. And it was really scary times supporting him, but we actually got a criminal barrister to ward off that committee, so we won that particular round. And that's what led me to decide to go out on the campuses of Australia with my fake rape crisis tour, which proved a very entertaining business, I must say. I mean, it all started at La Trobe University, where they immediately announced they were going to ban my talk because the administrators said it would clash with the values of the university. Then came Sydney University, where the riot squad had to be brought in to remove the protesters who were blocking access for my audience to the venue. After 6 months of investigation, Sydney University eventually took action. I made a complaint to them, and they took action against the chief protester, the person who'd organised the whole protest. What was really funny is she was really indignant because I managed to use the university's own bullying and harassment laws against her. And of course, these were regulations set up by her mob, the authoritarian left, to control other people's behaviour. And they certainly didn't expect them to find themselves on the receiving end. And mind you, she was only being punished because she was a serial offender, already on notice after flashing her tits at anti-abortion protesters the year before. Anyway, it was that Sydney protest which inspired Education Minister Dan Tehan to set up the French inquiry into free speech on our universities. And I'm really delighted that the government is now going to legislate to force universities to take this matter seriously. And it's a very nice thought for me that this might be part of my legacy. Anyway, the next development in my campus battle was the Queensland Supreme Court case last year involving a University of Queensland medical student, which actually we thought was going to be a real breakthrough because it determined that sexual assault should be handled by the criminal courts, not by universities. And in her judgment, Justice Anne Lyons commented on the inherent unfairness of the campus process. She said it would be a startling result if a committee consisting of academics and students who are not required to have any legal training could decide on allegations of a most serious kind without any of the protections of criminal law. Now, unsurprisingly, the very litigious University of Queensland appealed that verdict, and there was a really highly technical appeal judgment that came out recently, which unfortunately has given the green light to universities to keep on adjudicating these matters, at least for the moment. But this appeal judgment also acknowledged that Lyons was quite right about the unfairness of the UK question in the UK, the UQ case in question, where the student wasn't allowed any normal legal protection. But that's the norm in our universities. We've gone through the regulations of, I think, 35 of our universities. Only 3 definitively allow the accused access to lawyers. And many don't even provide the accused with all the evidence, and they all use this minimum standard of proof. Now, some of the universities are doing the right thing, in my view. They're referring all these matters onto the police, but they still leave the door open. So after the criminal case is decided, they still decide they can investigate under their own misconduct regulations. And we were talking to one university about this, and we said, why would they do that if the criminal system had decided the student wasn't guilty? Well, we have a lower standard of proof, the administrator said, which I think is very sick but pretty funny, really. So after the Supreme Court judgment, Dan Tehan told a Texas conference that universities shouldn't be dealing with these cases and they should be going to the criminal courts. Months later, Texas has now released a new document called the Good Practice Note, 76 pages, which doesn't mention the Education Minister's advice, simply makes a few token efforts to introduce some vague means of improving the due process for the accused and some training for campus officials. Whoop-de-doo. And nailing their colours to the mast, Texas proudly includes an End Rape on Campus activist as the fourth of their 13 authors of their own document. And in fact, Texas has long proudly acknowledged that they've been captured by ideologues. Last year, they produced a report which starts with an opening paragraph which mentions approvingly an alarmist feminist movie which is called The Hunting Ground. And that movie has been denounced by 19 Harvard law professors for promoting unfair and misleading propaganda. You won't be surprised to hear that the former Vice Chancellor Michael Spence at Sydney University was on the committee promoting this misleading propaganda, and that movie's been shown on campuses around Australia. Now, I'm sure most of you know I faced a massive media pile-on earlier this year because I was foolish enough to accept an honour for my work for gender equity through advocacy for men. And that was a huge mistake because I've always got away with challenging the feminist narrative because I'm self-employed and I didn't have a job, and they didn't have any way of getting at me. And the honour provided them with the excuse they needed to try to take me out. Within hours of that honour being announced, the orchestrated campaign began. And it was all orchestrated by an End Rape on Campus activist called Nina Funnell, and who circulated cherry-picked quotes from my 40 years from my media career, misleadingly edited videos which presented me in the worst possible light. She recruited people to denounce me. She sent defamation letters to any media program where I tried to defend myself and tried to expose what was going on. And she managed to really try to cancel me with the help of course, the ABC, most mainstream media, 2 attorneys general, and most of our government Senate. If you need evidence of the grip of feminism on all our major institutions, there it was. But I'm still out there, and I'm gathering a small army of people happy to help with my campaign to expose this issue of what's happening on our campuses and protect accused students. Last month, thank you. Last month, my legal team went into bat for a student at one of our universities. He's in the last few weeks of his course, his long professional course he's been doing. And he's been accused of a very minor incident of sexual touching, which involved a lot of alcohol and nothing much happening. The university immediately banned him from campus, stopping him completing there was a little bit of mandatory on-campus training. A few weeks he needed to complete his whole course. And we looked and looked to try to find a way around this, and I was very lucky because I discovered that the university has a regulation stating accused students must not be academically disadvantaged by these investigations. And we used that to force them to let him onto campus to complete that course. But now the university is claiming they're going to withhold his degree until his minor matter is heard in a local court next year. We're going to be challenging that decision for which the university has absolutely no authority. Universities across Australia allow prisoners, they allow convicted criminals to study on their campuses. So how on earth can they justify banning a student who's being who's simply facing an allegation of this sort. Now, there are dozens of other students facing similarly unfair treatment on their own, often not even telling their parents as they struggle with the shame of the accusations and the helplessness in dealing with this rigged system. Someone recently said to me that none of this is going to change in Australia until the son of a very important man has to face a kangaroo court. Really? Is that the only way this is going to change? I refuse to believe that, and I hope some of you will join me in tackling this massive injustice and helping me dismantle these kangaroo courts. Thank you. Thanks everybody for supporting me on my YouTube channel. I've got growing numbers of subscribers, which is really exciting. If you'd like to support me financially, go to my donate page on my website. Thanks a lot.